had good time to reflect on that idea of like, what do you do when you're faced with two truths, right? The truth of it's a great and amazing, the truth of like this sucks. What do you do? I think that you're going to hear about what Mary Elizabeth did when she was faced with that, and you also are going to get a special treat, hopefully, to hear more about individuals who helped her make the decision on what to do. So let's jump into this. Taylor, we're in Dallas. You're teaching. You're doing a great job. You got this, pre-calculus class. You have this prep class for SAT or ACT, and those are doing great. But then, what was the moment or that inspired you to say it's time to come to Memphis, or the moment to say maybe this core commitment thing has to stop? Because you're obviously here and you're not teaching anymore.
Yes. Yep. Oh man, there were so many different factors that went into that. So I think I'll kind of give you the background, like set the stage.
Yeah, set the stage.
The final moment. The
let's do that. Let's build it up.
It all. So I think I've always been thinking about things from like a system level, and I think that's really where my heart is and where my talents are. And so that last year I was the senior sponsor and was on a few different committees, and so I was honestly probably only in my classroom 75% of the time. I am so thankful. I had a co-teacher, Erica Gladney. I am going to make sure I send this to you. I mean, we wouldn't have functioned without her.
Right.
So I think in that moment, it was kind of when I was stepping back and thinking, like, how do I work smarter and this hard, but kind of just make sure that my efforts are at a place that they'll be effective. I was realizing more and more that, like, hey, maybe like it's at the system level. It's not necessarily in my classroom, because that is something that, I mean, my classroom was my happy place. Like, that was my home. But I realized I could make a bigger impact on the outside. At the same time, our principal at the time, Daniel Petters, had a huge SEL initiative. And I was so privileged to be able to go to a conference with her and just kind of hear about what impact it was having. But then I was also seeing the impact in my classroom. If my kids are working 40 hours a week outside of work, if they're not sleeping, if they're taking care of their kids or someone else's children, when I sit down and we're talking about law of sines and cosines, like, you don't care.
Yep.
And you shouldn't. That's not the most important thing. No. And so it was really this moment of, with this SEL initiative that we implemented, one class of mine would have circles every Friday, and so like a restorative circle. And just by buying into that one practice, the impact that had on my classroom, but also the achievement of my kids, was shocking. And so we're talking like kids who were like trying to fight at the beginning of the year were suddenly sitting next to each other, helping each other out with their assignments, or just their cohesiveness as a class and their drive to do more, like the relationships that they had built. And I was really fascinated by that. And so I think all of that kind of came together to be like, I think it's time to do something different. And my kids are graduating. The kids that I kind of worked up with, it's like, man, if I don't think that teaching is where I made the most impact, I think it's a natural time to figure out another way to still do the work, but outside of the classroom. And as our students are so honest, they were honest with me, and they're like, Ms. McCollum, we love you, but like, I think that you like talking to us about our like what's going on in our lives and just our feelings way more than pre-cal. Like, that didn't light you up the way that this lights you up. And like, we think that, do you notice that about yourself? And I was like, y'all, I don't think I did. And they're like, well, what if you go be our school counselor? And I was like, y'all, I'm brilliant. And also, like, I'm supposed to be here helping mold your mind. You're helping mold mine. This is not, we got to reverse this a little bit. This is not working the way I want it to. So I hope that the impact is mutual. But that was it. And truly, I mean, I think about that year, and I was real honest with my students about what was going on, because I'm always like, honesty is the best policy. So they helped me pick out schools to apply to. And they were, I remember opening up my UT acceptance letter, University of Texas, not Tennessee. Opening up my letter with my kids, because I was like, man, like, they have supported me through this journey. I also want them to see it's possible. Like, when you put your mind to something, you work really hard at it, that like, it is hard and you're doing all these things, but you can make both and work.
Right.
And so that's how I ended up going to SMU for a year, transferring to the University of Texas for 2 years, and got my school counseling degree. So I, at the same time, it's my individual license, like individual counseling as well. So I'm able to do both, which is awesome. So I worked as a school counselor for about a little over a year in Texas.
Right.
And now that I've moved back, I'm an individual therapist in Olive Branch, Mississippi.
Oh my goodness.
It's been awesome.
Shout out to the babies that gave the inspiration, right? And
For
so
many reasons.
they were able to give you, again, you were able to face your true truths. You knew that you enjoyed being with the children. You knew that, it was really rewarding work, but you also realized, and your kids helped you realize, the other side of that coin for you is that this might not be the actual right role to do the impact that you want to have and have that systemic impact you want to have. And so you decided, your kids helped you decide to say, when faced with those two truths, I'm going to keep fighting for this idea of helping kids and impacting kids' lives, but I'm going to do it in the role of a school counselor. And your babies were the ones to identify and say, this is where you shine. Not all that math stuff, but this is where you shine. And that's amazing. And I think I love that idea, this idea of the truth, because I always tell my boyfriend and people, like, truth hurts, but it also heals.
100%.
And it's, if you allow the truth to hurt, but it hurts, but if you allow it to heal you, it can lead to the most wonderful places, the most wonderful experiences, because then you're able to really do and be who you really want to be and do what you really want to do, and that's where you are now. And so that's what got you here to Memphis. Okay, but you went to school in Texas, not UT, but not UT Tennessee, but UT Texas. You could have stayed in Texas and became a counselor there. Why come back to Memphis? What makes you say you gotta come back home?
It's a great question. Well, that is also twofold. So, I'll backtrack a little bit and then we'll come back to this.
I love it.
I think one of my favorite things about Teach for America is that it gave me the opportunity to be in the classroom. And the neighborhood that I taught in was not Dallas proper. I remember I was in the car with some friends from Dallas, and we were driving down 175, and it's like 9 miles down the road. And I was like, oh, like, that's my exit. That's where I go to work every day. And they're like, this is Dallas? I was like, yeah, like, we're not in Deep Ellum. Like, I'm not walking to the coffee shop, like, grabbing my coffee in the middle of the day. Like, we're in the middle of a food desert, and the next closest thing is like Chicken Express if I forgot my lunch. And so just to be able to serve a neighborhood in a city that is, when we think of Dallas, it's like glitz and glam and concrete, and like, God, Pleasant Grove is the best. And it's not quite like Dallas that you think about. And so I think it was just this like echoing of like a forgotten neighborhood in a lot of ways. So I think that was kind of setting the stage and reminded me of like a lot of Memphis. And then it's also, if without TFA, I wouldn't have known. I think so often we have this thought of like, well, I have to be the best teacher ever. And I was the best teacher that I could be. And there's a lot of room for growth, like, just to be honest, but it helped me, and my kids helped me figure out, like, no, I could still be a part of the work, but I want to use my gifts in a place that I'm effective, and not all of us as core members are going to be the most effective in a classroom.
True.
But without our experience in the classroom, we can never do what we're doing now.
Yes.
And so there's kind of this both and of, I'm so thankful I was able to be that teacher for Valerie, because she hadn't had in a while. But man, I know that I could be even more effective in a different way. And so it was actually my fiance's idea to move back to Memphis. So or my husband's idea. That's different. We were at a wedding, and Clark was like, we were with a bunch of people from Memphis, and he went to Ole Miss as well. And we were like, man, like, cost of everything was just rising in Texas, and it was like, how are we going to make this sustainable? Like, how do we like truly like start a life? And so he was like, well, would you ever want to move back to Memphis? And I was like, we're capitalizing on this moment for everything that it's worth. Heck yes, we're moving back. And we're actually talking about this last weekend. We like just landed from our honeymoon, and we're driving through, and he was like, what do you love about Memphis? And 45 minutes later, when I was still talking, he was like, you can wrap it up now. Like, we're good. But I think it reminds me of that moment of like filling out my ranking for Teacher America. Like, the thought was always like, I want to go and learn something different, and then come back, relearn Memphis, and then use what I've learned from other places to make it better. And I think it felt like the right time. Like, I had the skills and the tools where I'm never going to feel all the way ready. But I always think about this metaphor of like, how can I build a stage? And then step back and let the people whose voices need to be heard shine. And it just felt like I had tools that I've never had before. It felt like I have the confidence that I've never had before. And just kind of the spunk or the boldness to say like, hey, like this is it. And so it's been such a blessing with being able to set my own schedule on the counseling side of things, and to do that in Olive Branch and to serve a community that I love so much there. But then also to have this free time, it was like, no, like this is the time to move back and to get involved in, you know, all of these amazing organizations and places are moving the needle in Memphis already. How can I just jump in and use my expertise now that I feel like I have something to offer to like continue to move that needle in a way?
I love so many good sound bites in there, because I love this idea of building the stage. That was really beautiful, because it's like, yeah, we see actions and we don't think about, a lot of times we go to concerts or different experience, like that's just a field. Somebody gets out there and builds that stage, and then somebody else comes and puts the drums together. James has I don't know if you have a band still, but James used to play in the band, and has all these musical instruments. And so I'm definitely thinking about James and this, but it's like somebody has to play the instruments, and then somebody has to be able to hop on that mic and help with the crowd, and there's somebody behind the scene doing all these pieces. And so you're saying, hey, how can I help build the stage, and then step back and let all the other players do what they need to do. And that I think is important. And I think the other piece that I want to highlight is this idea of, you went away, you said, I want to come back and relearn Memphis. So often what we do is we will, you know, whether it's a boo thing, go back to, whether it's an old job, or even family just had a little break, go back to your family, and you just are stuck in the idea of this is what it used to be, or this is the way it always is. And not taking an opportunity to take a breath and say, let me relearn something here. Let me try to explore and see what's happening, what's already present, or what could have changed before I jump in and say, this is the thing that needs to happen. Because your experience, that is a truth, but that truth came from 2016 or 2011 or 2012. It is 2023. It could be a total different thing. And it could be it's the same thing, but it's just a different pathway to get there. So I think that's important for our core members and our alumni to hear, because we can often do that. We can sometimes take our truths and place them as if they are absolutely true in that moment of time in the future, or even in the past. And that can be dangerous, because we're not setting ourselves up to learn. And if we don't learn, we can't ultimately get to the point of change.
100%.
I love that. And so when I think about that, then, I mean, I think you already answered the question, but I'll just say it clearly. What is your vision of one day, and are you living it right now?
Oh, it makes me teary. And this is where I can talk for like 700 hours. I won't try to be good. You know, I think in my vision of one day, every person, child, adult, has like the opportunity to do exactly what they were made to do, without barriers, without without difficulty. Right, and I think, like you said, like in like difficulty, then there's like insight and struggle and strength that's would never be formed without it. But in my vision of one day, it's just we live in a world where each person has dignity, and that is instilled by every person around them, just because of the fact that they're a human being. And the schools that kids go to instill that, and like the buildings that they're in instill that, and you know, teachers know the dignity that they have, and like the incredible calling that they have. Administrators are, you know, I mean, gosh, like you just think about custodians, like inside a school, I think is such a beautiful metaphor for life outside. Because it's such a center of community and such a hub, and schools touch everybody. I mean, kids have parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends and cousins, and you know, dignity is the word that comes to mind. And that they know that they're worth it. Like every child, adult, like they're worth all the early mornings, all the late nights, all the extra planning, all of the, you know, this money's gonna go into savings, but now it's going to Sam's Club because we need snacks in the classroom. Like it is, that's such a convoluted way of saying it, but I think about like in my vision of one day, everyone will know that they are worth like the little moments, because the little moments are the big moments. And I hope I'm living it. I'm doing my best. You know, I think that in my vision of one day, it's not just in schools, but it's also like what our dinner tables look like. It's what like our communities look like, that they're beautiful and healthy and thriving and whole, and that people know that they're loved and cherished and seen just because of who they are. that's like something, that's a big old soapbox I can get on.
I just love that because I think your one day experience is, or one day vision, excuse me, is an experience that requires all of us. And sometimes, you know, and it's not a right or wrong, we just did an activity at work. We're talking about the way you think about things. It's not right or wrong, it's just like understanding why you think the way you think. And I just think that's powerful, though, the way you're thinking about your one day vision of this idea of how we show up and interact with each other. Because that's something that every single person, no matter what your profession, no matter your age, no matter what you got going on, you have a choice on how you interact and choose to interact with other people. 100%. All of us can be conscious and take time to show up and treat people with dignity and 100%. See them and value them. And then through those actions, right, and learn from them how they want to be treated in terms of dignity and value, because we might have our own perceptions. And then from that, create a world where everybody's feeling that. And then think about that. I think that goes, and I think you are living it because you're doing the counseling work. That starts with the mind. It starts with how you orient. It starts with what you think about yourself. Because sometimes with the idea of dignity, do you feel like you're getting there? Do you feel worthy? Do you feel all those things? So I just think that is amazing. But I love this piece of that it's not just you. It's going to take a lot of other people involved. And that is something that you can get behind every single day. That's the thing that gets you out of those dark days, you know, in the winter months and all that. That can get you out that bed because you realize I'm a part of something bigger than me, and I am able to actively contribute to that thing that's bigger than me and make me a part of it. And that's like from when you got your coffee at whether you Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, or you use your own Cougar at home, you still are interacting with people, or you can interact with yourself. And so how are you showing up in that moment? I literally had this statement the other day. I had some shoes, and I was just rushing. I've been in this whole spirit of rushing. And it was like, sometimes, you know, the tongue of your shoe can become worn. And it was just like, I don't want to fix it because it folded up. I was like, I got to get out of here. I'm already late, James. I'm always late. But I apologize. That's probably what happens to James when I'm late. But anyway, so I was just like, oh my gosh, this pebbles in my shoe. The tongue of my shoe was irritating me. And I just pushed through. And I stopped myself. And I said, you are worthy of walking around comfortably. Take the shoes off. Fix the tongue and put them back on. And it took 5 seconds, and it was like, I feel comfortable. But I would have went through that all day because 100%. I thought, you know what, and again, that doesn't negate the fact that I gotta figure out my time so I can make sure I'm not late for James' meeting. So that still is important. But there's also a moment of like, in that moment, show myself dignity, show myself value, show myself worth. And it really did take only 3 seconds. So if I'm late, it's probably because I'm, you know, listening to music, jamming in the morning, and I gotta figure that out. But yeah, I think that's really great. And so that makes me think about this idea of like, you know, how are you showing yourself dignity? How are you actually valuing yourself? Because you can't pour into anyone's cup if your cup is empty. So take a moment as we take a break and think about how are you showing yourself dignity? How are you showing yourself love and respect, and showing yourself that you are worthy? Because to do the work that we're talking about, to do this one day vision, the one day vision of TFA, it requires people who see themselves as a beautiful, amazing, whole people who can do it, not just by themselves, but with other people. And so let's take a moment to think about how we're feeling, check in on ourselves, so then we can check in with other people. All right, we'll be right back.